Welcome to The Independent Musician. Our weekly podcast will focus on the independent artist and the music market at large. You'll hear from those artists as well as music execs, tech experts, and marketing leaders from around the globe. We'll discuss what it takes to make it in the biz and how you can overcome obstacles as you progress your craft, all the while making it interesting and fun. Now, here's your host, Mark Skoda.
All right, this is Mark Skoda with The Independent Musician, and we have today an artist and philosopher as well as a mental health advocate, Mr. Sean Gill from Oregon. Sean, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, we do a lot of artists and a lot of people with various backgrounds from all over the country and all over the world, frankly, and I was interested in your background as it relates to the work you've done in your music career, and as well as how you sort of morphed into an advocate for mental health, as well as just one of those things as a person of many different interests. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into music, and has Oregon always been home for you? And love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I can start by saying Oregon has not always been home. I grew up in southeastern Wisconsin, lived there until my mid-30s, and then I spent 5 years in Denver, Colorado, before I came here about 7 years ago.
Very good.
So I've lived in some big cities and some small towns, and I find the smaller city life is more suited for me. Denver was a bit much, so glad to be here in Eugene, Oregon. Started. Oh, go ahead.
That's a pretty part of the state too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I started playing guitar when I was 13 years old, and pretty immediately it sort of took over my life. It was something that I just couldn't put it down. I would practice until my fingers hurt, and I would put the guitar down, and like 15 minutes later, it would just kind of be in my hands again, and I don't remember picking it up. And of all the things when I was younger that I was pretty good at, I was good at science, I was pretty good at art, I was interested in those things, but music was something I had to work really hard at to be good at. And somehow that just felt more satisfying. As kind of I was looking for career paths and things like that. So I ended up ultimately going to school for music. I have a bachelor's degree in jazz and classical guitar. And I have definitely worn the jack of all trades label since graduating college. And sometimes I wonder, could I have done that different? Maybe. Would I have? No, I don't think so. I mean, for all the struggles that we could talk about, I don't think I could have done it any other way. I don't think I would have been happy doing only one kind of music or sitting in a cubicle and playing in a band on the weekends. It just wouldn't have been for me.
Yeah, you obviously, besides your formal music education, you've been in many different roles in music as a freelancer, and I was reading in your profile also playing jazz. Obviously, you're classical and jazz guitarist. My son, who's a rocker, he will tell you, it's kind of funny, he always tells me jazz is played for, thousands of chords for one person, and rock's played for 3 chords for 1,000 people. But, the whole genre is very interesting, particularly with the sort of jamming and some of the improvisation that's traditional in jazz, and I think that's excellent. Of course, it's equally as complex as any music there, and I suspect that that's been a lot of fun for you. And so, obviously, Sean, you've obviously played in many different genres of music. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I grew up a metalhead. That's where I got started. Being a child of the 80s and playing in bands with my friends. And like I said, I went to college and studied jazz and classical music. For whatever reason, I wanted to know how music worked, how the intricacies of how it's put together. So I was always interested in pursuing music theory and composition and things like that. And when I first learned a little bit about theory and composition, it totally fascinated me that I could write music for instruments I didn't play. I could understand how a violin works or how a trumpet works, and I could make music for someone else to play. Um, and that's just translated into a lot of different applications. I've played in blues bands. I've played sessions for country music educational books for some publishers. I worked with a group for a while in Denver that landed a couple of film scores and things like that. So I think really being fascinated with all the aspects of how music works has let me basically explore any corner of the music world that I want to.
Well, and of course, doing that allows you to go ahead and make a living at doing music, right? Because of the fact that you're broad in terms of your experience base. Music theory, by the way, I always encourage, even in my own son's experience. Music theory was critical, as well as music production, and he also, besides being a drummer, plays guitar. But the whole point is, you need to be a sort of jack of all trades. You need to have these other skills in order to effectively become a musician in today's world.
Yeah, we kind of grow up with the idea that we're going to get in a band and we're going to have a hit and we're going to be superstars. And it's great to have that dream. I wouldn't discourage anyone from pursuing that, but understand too that that's a very small fraction of people that ever happens for. And there's a lot more to that than just talent and skill and musical ability. There's a lot of luck. There's a lot of knowing the right people. But if you kind of reel back from the big dreams to saying, how can I actually make a living? How can I pay my rent, put food on the table, and do that? I've got a gig playing at a restaurant this Friday with my jazz trio. That's one way to do it. A lot of my work is actually, I work with Finale music notation software to make sheet music look nice.
All right, okay.
So there are a lot of things other than just performing that you can pursue as well.
Yeah, I think that's important, because I tell artists all the time that it's really not just about, writing, producing, and releasing a song. That's just the beginning of the sort of adventure that is music and the music business. It's really about what you do after that, and everything from your promotion activity to the integration of your social media to your fan base and gigging, as well as building on your core skills so that you're always figuring out what else you can do. Because in order to make a living at this, you've got to, as I like to say, find those 1,000 fans that'll spend $100 a year with you, whether it's downloads or tickets or merchandise, and suddenly you're making a living at your music. And I've talked over this past series of months since I've launched this podcast with a lot of artists, many of whom actually are doing this full time. Now, there's, as you point out, they may not be getting rich per se, but they are enriched by being able to do what they love and being able to make a living at doing what they love, which is in and of itself, I think, extremely important as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's been part of my, to sort of bring in the mental health aspect of it over the past 10 years or so, going through an evolution of understanding why I'm doing this, and really getting to a place where my own personal satisfaction is the most important thing. And if the money comes, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's fine. A number of years ago, I got to a place where I thought, you know what? I'm just going to give my music away.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If people want to download my stuff on Bandcamp, if they want to pay, they can, but they don't have to, because it's more important for me to share that and have it out there in the world than it is for me to try to make money off of it.
Well, I think, it's interesting. I posted a chart that was put out there regarding sort of 108 million actual ISRC codes currently on Spotify, and of those, 69 million of them roughly have less than 1,000 downloads, and 39 million of those, I believe, have 0 downloads. So the issue of getting your music heard is really about building a relationship with your fans and getting it out there, and in your case, doing that through alternative channels beyond streaming, right? It's oftentimes one-to-one relationship building with your fans and sharing that with people that and having them share it with others.
Yeah, it's definitely still true. Um, Making connections in your local area, wherever that is, that still matters. Um, Everybody gets caught up in social media and YouTube and Spotify and trying to promote everything there. And like you say, there's so much music out there. Uh, if you change your focus and put a little more energy into your local shows, getting to know the other musicians in your area, making those connections, those personal connections, face to face, can make a huge difference in actually paying the bills.
And I tell people that all the time. I said, build your regional following. Tour the same places within sort of what I call that, 5 to 10 hour drive, so that you don't have to fly and you can keep your costs low. And if you had to, you can, find a low cost hotel, and let people know that you're going to be there. Find those super fans that really like what you're doing, invite them to the show, identify them, and be able to interact with them. And then, of course, push that out to more and more people as you go through, and doing it consistently, because it's not, I have a lot of artists that say, boy, get me on the radio, get my music heard. Well, you can get on the radio and they may play once, twice, even 3 times, but that's it. And that doesn't get you much. And unfortunately, the whole distribution model for music generally is broken, I think. And I think part of that is due to streaming. If you look at streaming, it pays on a per stream basis. Well, there are a lot of bots out there, and a lot of those bots are actually mapped so that they look like real people. And so as a result, the model of paying on a per stream basis, in my view, is inappropriate. We need to pay on engagement, on individuals, because the fans are how you build a relationship, not on streams. And in the end, I think that's something that has to begin to change. But more importantly, music is communal, right? It's to be shared. And prior to recording, everybody either had to come to the musician or the musician had to go to the village, right? And I think that still is true today, particularly post-pandemic. We were all isolated in such a fashion as to, frankly, make a lot of people crazy. And I think what's happening today, we just had a 3-day concert here with Taylor Swift. Granted, an icon, right? And she grew up here in this area of Nashville, but sold out every night. And the fact of the matter is, all these people who've been watching her career since she's been 15 years old are going not once and twice, but maybe even 3 times, because there's an affinity for the artist and what she conveys, and more importantly, how she interacts with her audience as well.
Yeah, yeah. Playing shows locally, playing live, being out there is a form of advertising, and really, advertising is about name recognition. Back in Milwaukee, when I lived in Wisconsin, the band I had, we would play local shows, and I can't tell you how many times I got the comment from someone after the show, like, "Oh, where are you guys from?" I'm like 10 blocks down the street. That's where I live.
Right, right.
And if you're out there often enough, and these people see you repeatedly, they'll remember you, and that matters so much in building a fan base and just having some consistency. And you got to stick to it for a while. I've worked with other people who've said, if you start a brand new band, expect to try to, kind of grind at it for about 2 years before things start to snowball a little bit, because it takes a while. It takes time. There's not an instant satisfaction to being in a band.
No, that's right. I've got one young man who's working his tail off in Carolinas. He's a singer-songwriter. He started off just learning chords. He picked up the guitar literally 2 years ago during the pandemic, and fell in love with it and started writing music. He's got a great voice, got a great look, and he's probably playing 3-4 times a week, and he's feeding his sort of career through the earnings there, and able to produce more music, write music, and get it out. And now he's putting a band together, and just unbridled energy. 19-year-old guy, and he's actually doing really, really well.
Yeah. That's a great time to do it too, because I also teach a lot, and I tell my students sometimes, I'm not going to tell you not to go to college, but if you want to be in a band and get in a van and get on the road, do it when you're 20 or 25, because when you're 47, like I am, you're not going to want to do that anymore.
Well, that's right. And I tell my son and others, I said, look, at the end of the day, I was working full time before I went back to college at 23, and I went full time and went and did my master's degree and started a PhD before I left the country. The point is, you have that youth only one time. Go chase your dream for a while. You have plenty of time to come back and get into an education or the corporate world or do what you want, particularly today. I mean, the whole model is changing for many, many different reasons, of course. And we're now seeing even the implications of AI. I mean, one of the reasons that music is becoming so standard for so many people is because they're using some of these AI tools now to write music. And that music's getting published even on the streaming services. So it's causing even a greater amount of plethora of music availability that people can't even find. So how do you get found, right? It's exactly as you described. You go down 10 blocks from where you live and you play the local place and you meet some people and you spend some time afterwards. You don't just show up, throw up, and get out. You get in and spend some time with your fans, tell them about who you are, so they have an affinity for you. There's a great article. I wish I have to find it. I just read it recently about a particular psychologist who was speaking about the issue of how people behave and how people form relationships. And he talked about the fact that over social media, particularly with FaceTime and the like, we don't have the hormones that cause affinity, right? In other words, there is a physiological response to being with somebody, either in front of them or even a touch, which automatically causes you to secrete certain hormones that create affinity. And I'm not talking about girlfriend, boyfriend, I'm talking about really just the ability to have that human contact. It doesn't happen over social media. It doesn't happen over a video. It only happens in the person. And I think that's what's so critical about gigging and being out and performing, is because that's how you build your bond with your fans, so that ultimately, you tell them where you are, and you use social media to amplify the relationship that you've ultimately built.
Yeah, very true. We're social creatures. Even for someone like me, I'm very introverted and I need my alone time to recharge. But I have to be out there with people to make music too. It's a two-way street. I could just sit at home in my studio and make my stuff and put it on the internet. But that's not quite enough for me. I feel like I have to take that next step to share it with people. And the more AI-driven things get and the more canned, repeated things get on Spotify, I think the antithesis of that is to go see live music. I think people are going to get tired of streaming, and they actually are going to want to go see human beings make art.
Exactly. No one pays to have a computer on a stage and watch the computer. I mean, I guess maybe ABBA, right, with their 3D holograms, which is like pretty cool technology innovation, having it by itself. But having said that, I think at the end of the day, it is important. Music has to be experienced, right? It is, by virtue of the analog signal, moves you personally, right? It has an impact on your physiology. And I'd like to turn a little bit, I noticed that one of the things you've moved towards, in fact, is your own podcast on science. How did you do that, and what's that all about?
Yeah, I did that for about 2 years. I occasionally will write something for it, for the blog from time to time. But I had gotten to a place where I was like, I want to do something different. And I've always been a science-minded person, and a science education advocate. And I was trying to think of something that I could do as someone who doesn't have, a doctorate in something, to kind of push those ideas of progress, technologically, scientifically, and get people to think about the future more. And I'd gotten into a lot of futurism ideas, the idea of not just thinking about tomorrow or next year or the next election, but like 1,000 years from now. What can we do to make sure that civilization is still there and is still, fulfilling the potential of humanity, I guess. And it was also kind of an exercise for me to say, okay, can I do this thing every single week? Can I research it, write it, record it, produce it, put it out? And I did that for quite a while. And it was very satisfying as a goal for myself to go through that regular production cycle, to do that. And, at some point, it just I got a little burnt out on it. And since it wasn't something that I was actually making any money on, I decided to shut it down. But I'm happy for what I did.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I feel somewhat the same way. One of the reasons I do this podcast, not only to support our artists, but support the brand of Iron Gate Records, and to provide, interesting commentary for people. And, I'm not frankly, a long form of communication. It's doing pretty well. I'm not Joe Rogan, but having said that, I'll take
okay.
what we get. That's okay. Exactly. We're really focused on trying to help artists maybe listen to people and that have experiences that they may themselves be going through, and how to address that. And it's been a lot of fun, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned, you're a prog rock guy for a little bit too. I'm a big Yes fan and a big Moody Blues fan. I mean, they were, Yes, of course, was really one of the original prog rocks before the guys at Kansas came along, which also was equally so. I think prog rock is so cool because there's a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of what do I want to say? A lot of creativity that goes into some of the music in prog rock, which I find interesting.
Yeah, it was always appealing to me. I think even when I was a kid, before I knew much about music and things would come on the radio, I was always interested in the Yes tunes and the Rush tunes, more than anything else. And then as I got into more of the prog metal stuff like Dream Theater and Fates of Warning, really appealed to me. And it really kind of combined my early metalhead with my college degree. I mean, for better or worse, and prog rock sometimes I think rightly gets mocked for it. Yeah, it's rock music for nerds, in a lot of ways. Right. I'm not going to apologize for writing a song in 13/8,
Right.
And the way the music world is now, that's okay too. That's probably the good thing about the internet and music, is that you can find your niche no matter what you do.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It on one side, there is, just the absolute volume of content. But honestly, I look at TikTok, which, by the way, one of the reasons TikTok I think has done so well is because they've got a better algorithm. If you look at what's happening with Instagram and Facebook, the organic engagement rates are way down because they're trying to push you to sell advertising to you, right?
Yeah.
But TikTok's done a very interesting thing because I look at this as a more open platform in terms of the way they're able to use their algorithms to push more content of the nature that you are interested in to you. And so you're able to discover more people that are either playing the music you like or perhaps dealing with some of the issues you want to hear about. I remember when I first started watching TikTok, for instance, you had all the girls dancing to the goofy songs and shaking their midriff and all that stuff. That's gone now. That doesn't happen at all anymore for me yet. I'm hearing the politics I want, the news stuff, the music, the publishing. There's some people that I follow that deal with the storylines of great bands. And so what I find is now, based on my algorithmic use of the tool that is TikTok, I find a lot of information that I want to hear and see, and it's more enjoyable for me. At the same time, it helps people in the music industry get heard by a fan base. They're not just throwing it out there. And I think one of the things I tell people also is to be authentic, right? That's the other element people want. They don't want everything to be overproduced. We know auto-tune works. We know that you can create a great video, but somehow people want to get behind that now and find out who you really are.
Yeah, that's a kind of an interesting. I don't use TikTok myself. Maybe I'll have to try that, because I know YouTube will occasionally suggest videos, and I just think, why on earth would you think I'd want to watch that?
Right.
It reminds me kind of actually of the early days of the internet, when you had to do a little more work to find new things, but they were out there. Your own little communities were out there to find in forums or things like that.
Right.
and it would be great to see sort of the social media internet kind of swing back around to helping you further explore things that you're already interested in rather than just trying to throw clickbait into your face all the time.
And I think that is happening. And I think now, even with AI, we're seeing more of that. It's an area that I do a lot of research on. I'm not going to be pretending that I'm an expert, but having said that, it is extremely interesting what's happening with AI and what's doing to the market generally and to jobs. But even down to music writing, I mean, I've demonstrated for some of my friends and family about how you can write a song on some of the chat bots, right? Chat GPT. Now, it's not going to be a great hit, but the point is it creates a point of inspiration, right? And some of these other AI tools where you can listen and maybe read a song that's written by AI and say, that gives me some great ideas for where I want to take the music. And so it, oftentimes could be helpful to overcome writer's block or even give you inspiration about where you may want to take a particular piece of music as well.
Yeah, and that's if you're trying to write music and trying to be creative, I've always found it helpful to cast as wide a net as possible,
Exactly.
If you're in a punk rock band and all you ever listen to is punk rock, your music's going to get pretty stale. Expand your horizons and try different things.
Sean, what are you doing on the mental health side? I know you're an advocate for mental health, and obviously, post-pandemic, we're seeing some horrific events occur around the country. I think mental health problems today, just because of the pandemic, have really brought hell on earth for a lot of people. What are you doing in that regard?
Yeah, the biggest thing I do is just talk about it. I am very open to talking to anybody about the fact that I spent the last 3.5 years seeing a therapist. And, once upon a time, that was something that you did kind of secretly and you didn't want anybody to know about it.
Right.
And now I think we got to be more okay with talking about it. And I will tell people that, you don't have to be like clinically diagnosed with depression, or you don't have to be suicidal to want to get help. If you are, please do. But if you're just like, I got to a point about 4 or 5 years ago where I just felt like things are okay, I guess, but I don't feel good about it. And everything that I had done, my usual coping mechanisms just weren't working. And I would kind of get into a funk like you do, everybody does. And instead of being a day or two, it would be a week, and then it would be 2 weeks, and then it would be a month. And, it was like, this isn't really severe, but yeah, let's try something different and talk to a professional who can take an objective look at this from the outside and give me a different perspective.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's important because oftentimes we've sort of created this condition whereby it's almost a scarlet letter, and so people don't deal with it directly, and as a result, we end up with these horrific incidents of people just going over the edge. And I think that's not to say that you don't go running around and telling everybody about your experience, but you have to be open, as you pointed out, to having a conversation and helping people, let them know that there's places they can go that you can have a conversation, and then help direct them perhaps to more professional help.
Yeah, and that's, especially for men.
Yes, men are horrible at this, right?
So we're bad at it. We're bad at asking for help, and there's such a stigma to seeking help. You're supposed to, as they say, man up.
Right.
And that's sometimes you just can't.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, in particular now, as we've seen the challenge of just the isolation that's occurred as a result of lockdowns and the pandemic itself, and I think there were a lot of decisions made that, quite frankly, weren't perhaps the right direction, but now we have to deal with that. And I think even our homeless problem today, it always bothers me that we're spending so much money overseas, and we're letting in so many people who, frankly, are here illegally, but we're not helping Americans who are on the street right now, who need the help directly, who, quite frankly, deserve that help through our social net that is out there for them, and yet we're not dealing with that. And as a result, we're seeing these crises turn into violence, and that is just a really unfortunate situation, to say the least.
Yeah, I think the problem has many different layers to it, and it just kind of politically, we're not very good at taking three or four different approaches at the same time. We always want there's a saying, I forget who said it, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Correct.
The people want, they want one law passed to solve all the problems, or they want to take one pill that fixes everything.
Yeah.
And nothing is like that. So you have to be willing to take some solution and a partial solution, and then build on that and take many steps along the way toward getting closer to where you think we should be. And you may never get 100% there, because that's life and humans are complicated and messy. But we can do a lot better than we're doing now.
Amen. So at this point in your life, are you making a living at your career goals? Are you making a living on your music and the other things you're doing?
In a sense, yeah. Most of my actual bill paying comes from, like I said, the finale notation work, and I teach a lot, which is, I think, really fulfilling and important, since I don't have kids of my own. So kind of being able to impart some influence on future generations is very satisfying that way.
And you're teaching guitar, presumably?
I actually teach, I teach a lot of different music things. I'm teaching at a local school, and so it's guitar, ukulele, piano, percussion. It's another thing people should do if you want to expand your music opportunities, is learn how to play another instrument from whatever your main instrument is. You'll learn a lot about your own music, and you can apply it elsewhere.
We have a great... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, it's good enough. And I think that's part of my process over the past few years with my mental health care, is kind of finding what satisfaction or contentment and success really means to me. And being able to say, if I used to look at, I'd put out a new album and it wouldn't sell right away, and I would get mad and upset and depressed about it. And I'm not in that space anymore. I put it out there because I want to, and people can take it or leave it, because the satisfaction that I get the most out of is from having made the thing.
Right. Not existing before, and now it exists, and you created that. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I tell people all the time, I said, obviously you're making your living by using all of your skills in music, from teaching and from writing and from even using, software. My son, I tell him all the time, that's why he's doing a degree in music production while he's finishing his high school degree. We got a great program here in the Nashville area. It's called dual enrollment. So he'll graduate with an associate science degree in music production while he's also finishing high school, which is very cool. And I tell people this all the time: find these unique ways forward to figure out how to optimize your time. You can do this. If a 17-year-old kid, with frankly the backing of his parents, can do this, then you can do this. And I tell people this all the time: don't hit a wall and say, I can't get through it. Figure out how to go over, under, around, but get through that wall one way or another.
Yeah, and I think what's helped me in more recent years too is being kind of flexible in my idea of the goal. Like if I have an end vision of what I want, and I'm completely obsessed with that, and I'll be completely disappointed if I don't get there, that's not healthy.
Right.
I have an idea of what could happen if I start a new band, or if I start a new job, or whatever. But I focus more on, like, what am I doing right now? What is the thing I need to be doing right now to take the next step? I might have in my mind, there's 50 steps into the future to get to something, but I'm going to spend most of my energy on the thing that's right in front of me.
Exactly. And I think at the end of the day, that's really as simple as it gets, is that, put that one foot in front of the other, move forward. As long as you're moving forward and having fun doing that, and getting some satisfaction, both personally, professionally, and hopefully financially, that's a life well lived. And, we're here for such a short time. Find the things that you love to do and do them well. I don't care whether it's corporate life, or that's the musical life, or whether it's technology, but chase that as much as you can. Chase it early, because at the end of the day, as you point out, at 47 years old, you may not be chasing that dream in the same way. You may be doing other things. So have fun in the meantime.
Yeah, and think of it, I guess the metaphor that life is like a river is very true, that, rivers don't go in straight lines.
Amen.
And be prepared to not go in a straight line and enjoy it while you're doing it.
And sometimes it's a nice moving, flowing brook, and sometimes you hit the rapids.
Yeah, exactly.
And every now and then you go over the waterfall.
Yeah. I talked with my therapist about this idea of clumping. Like my life comes in clumps.
Right.
There'll be a period of where I'm not doing anything. I'm uninspired. I'm bored. And then all of a sudden, everything hits at once, and work is busy, and the band is busy with gigs, and I'm full of ideas for new songs. And then it goes crazy for a while, and then it stops again. And it used to bother me that happened. I wanted steady, even pace of life. And then I finally realized that's not how it works for me anyway. So I should just embrace it the way it is. And again, take whatever is right in front of me at that moment.
Exactly. Well, Sean, this has been a real pleasure. I'm going to wrap it up here. I appreciate your time today. It's been great to have your insights and perspectives, and particularly as I think you've gone through many, many years of this experience. But it's been a fun conversation. I hope our audience has appreciated your candor and, frankly, your openness.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us this week on The Independent Musician. Make sure to visit our website, IronGateRecordsRadio.com, where you can subscribe to the show on your favorite streaming platform, so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in this podcast, we'd appreciate you giving us feedback or simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in next week for a new episode of The Independent Musician, where the independent musician is the star.